gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages and all persuasions. This is a new episode of Tim's 2 Cents, the podcast where I talk about shit and you take that as gold. But remember, it's always just 2 cents. It's not worth that much, so take that with a grain of salt. But no, I would prefer that you take it as more than 2 cents, but I can't sell it as anymore as part of a legally binding contract with Daniel Brown. If you found me here, if you're listening now, you probably already know about this, but this podcast comes out on a network, the YMB network, where I also do You, Me, and BTC with Daniel Brown and Zach Vole every single week at 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. And that's a great show. If you want to listen to more stuff like conversations, it's more of a hangout, kind of pretty chill. Last episode was just me and Zach, so we pretty much just bullshitted for an hour. Normally, or a decent amount of time, we'll have guests on, but again, it's not like we're not interviewing them necessarily. We're more just having them come on and hang out. We ask them questions, but I mostly bring that up to say that if you'd rather be more involved with the show, like right as it's happening, we do have a chat box there, and it is live, so you can get on the show. We'll definitely talk about anything that you put in the chat box to a reasonable amount. I mean, we won't necessarily talk about everything, but I'll probably at least mention it. This show, and then also another show that is on the network, Zach Vole's The Coin Pod. He does every single week, normally comes out on Tuesdays. He does an interview show, and that's very crypto-centric, very much focused on Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and all the kind of technologies that are branching out from that. Zach, he'll have somebody on, maybe one or two people, normally one, where he does an in-depth interview. They talk a lot about it's much more technical than this one is. I like to do my show where it's not really about facts. It's more just about opinions, I guess. But the whole idea of his show is you're going to learn something about it. My show is maybe you're going to think, who knows? But check him out. If you like conversations, Zach does a very good job doing a very good interview and getting the right kind of answers out of people so that it is still an entertaining show. You can follow him at Zach Vole on Twitter, ZACKVOELL. So throw him a follow. I'm sure he'd love it if you tweeted at him, tell him if you liked the recent show, if you didn't like it, or if you have any ideas for any future shows, any ideas for new guests. For me as well, for this show, best place to reach me will be on Twitter at BakersDozen93. That is with a Z, I believe. No, it's just BakersDozen93 with an S at the end of Bakers. And you can get me there. Again, let me know if you like the show, if you hate it, if you have any ideas for it. You can comment on the bottom of YouTube videos or on Spreaker, but I'm more likely to notice it if you hit me up on Twitter. I'm more likely to get a notification on my phone, and then if I do that to even pay attention to them, it's, like I said, a lot easier to get me on Twitter. That's where I like to keep most of this stuff. It's a lot, I don't know, fuck that. Whatever. We'll get into what we're talking about this week. This is episode 12, and I've been kind of writing notes about this the past couple weeks, trying to think of when I want to do this show, because I'm going to talk about something that is very close to exactly what we do. We call the You, Me, and BTC show your Bitcoin and Liberty podcast. And so I want to talk about libertarianism this week. But before I do that, I also want to mention that the reason why we're able to do these extra shows on the network, the reason why we were able to branch out from just doing the weekly live show, was the new sponsorship by Chronologic. They, again, if you're more interested in the crypto type stuff, you're more interested in focusing on the technology that we can build off of that, Chronologic is also something you'd be interested in. It's based off of Ethereum, and it has to do with contracts and debt contracts and like smart contracts, building contracts and laws like that into a code rather than depending on the state to force those things, to talk about those things. And that actually does have something to do with what I'm talking about today, because a lot of libertarianism, or I would say kind of the biggest thing about it, is just property rights and what that really means and how far you take that and how far the property rights can be enforced. So again, check them out. Check out Chronologic and let them know you heard about it here. Let them know you heard about it from our network. Let them know that their money isn't just going to waste. and that would be great for us, and we'd eternally love you or something. Daniel would probably say something like that. What I normally do on this show, and the whole idea of it, if you haven't heard this before, is I like to go through different ideologies, belief systems, kind of systems of belief. I already said that, but like systems of how you want to organize your life, or how you think the world around you should be organized, and how you think like the one biggest, or normally ideologies, it seems with people, it comes off of the one big problem in the world that they see. Now, I think most people would admit the world's kind of just fucked up in general, but most people have this one particular thing as to why the world is fucked up. And if you ask a libertarian, if you ask specifically an anarchist libertarian, or an anarcho-capitalist, or a market anarchist, the problem is government. I mean, most anarchists will say that, but then they will also, including with anarcho-capitalists, you do have to have some kind of a governance in there. And whether that's spontaneous order, you can read better books about that. You can read Mises and Rothbard and Lew Rockwell, and you can, I mean, he's more of an aggregator. He does write some things, but I don't really want to throw him in with Rothbard. But if you're looking at like the theory of the ideology, definitely look up Rothbard, read like any of the old kind of, just the idea that if you're going to have property rights, if you're going to have a dedication to free will and giving people autonomy over themselves, you have to do that fully, or else it's not really worth it. You can't kind of go halfway with, we'll let you do what you want, but not this time. It kind of gets muddled, and something like autonomy, or giving people autonomy, is a tricky subject, because it's hard to do that fully. It's hard to do that in a complete way, because if you at all try to put a hamper on that, then it does kind of, it muddies the water, and it kind of pollutes the idea that you are for complete and total autonomy. Because if you're against one part of something that is complete, that obviously takes away from every other instance where you are for it. But I guess I'll get into it a little bit more now. Normally what I do is I go through the good part of whatever ideology I'm looking at. I don't know if I fully explained that a couple minutes ago, but I go through different ideologies, belief systems, try to pick out the nuggets of good, the nuggets of what is actually applicable to your life, normally looking at it as to our day-to-day life. And I live in America, so I'm normally applying it to something like that. What can you take away from an ideology like stoicism or optimism or socialism or any of these things, and actually apply it to a benefit to yourself in modern day, the modern day Western world? Because that's really all I have any kind of experience with, and I kind of just base, we all do that, but that's kind of where I'm coming from to explain that. But as I said, like, this is a pretty big thing. And as far as the last couple of years of my life, since I was 19, I'm 24 now, I've very much considered myself a libertarian, probably longer have considered myself like a market anarchist. And then in the last year, I think I would say, or year or two, I've started kind of backing off of that. I don't really like kind of just spouting because my problem, the whole reason why I started this podcast was trying to figure out my own ideas and not just wanting to just parrot something I read out of a book. I don't want to just parrot something I read out of a Rothbard book. I don't want to just parrot I'm trying to remember one of his books now, so this isn't looking very good. But I'm trying not to just parrot like Man, Economy, or State, or stuff like that, or something from Mises or Hayek or Friedman. I don't want to just go, oh, I learned this now, and now I can win this argument. And I think, first off, I'll get into the bad parts of it after I kind of list the good, but just for the sake of, if I do forget, I think that is one of the bigger problems with any of these kind of fringe political ideologies, whether that's a more hardcore socialist or, on the other end, like an anarcho-capitalist, where they don't learn things for the sake of learning them and understanding things in a more nuanced approach. these kind of far ideologies kind of do away with nuance and say, if you're doing this now, you have to do this forever, regardless of the situation. And because of that, they don't really learn stuff because of a want to understand things. They learn things so that they can win an argument, and so they can pwn somebody on Twitter or be like, well, see, you have an ideological fallacy here, and so you should just therefore give up your ideology, which is not how it works, especially on Twitter. No one's been convinced of an ideology because someone else pointed out that their ideology didn't make complete sense, because you can always just do that right back to the person. Again, going back to this, I'll try to go through the good parts of libertarianism and keep it shorter, because I will definitely have a tendency to wax on about it. But I think as far as a ideology and a moral kind of guide to your life, if you're going off of what a lot of these people have written, it is based on, and this is another big part of what my life, at least in the past, has been a part of, is the kind of the Jesus' teaching, or, I mean, that's of course based from or borrowed from other stuff, but the reason why I think this was so attractive to me first as I started to get out of my Christian upbringing was the fact that libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism is very kind of congruent with Christianity in the idea of just the golden rule of do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And that doesn't just mean be nice and turn the other cheek, or it's not necessarily advocating for pacifism, or you can make any argument you make, any argument you want off of that. But it's the idea of, if most people would not want the government to stop them from doing something they saw as good. Most people wouldn't want the government to stop them from giving like CBD oil to their kids with seizures or something like that, or doing any other thing in their life that they see as fine and not harming anybody. So why would you then go and make something that doesn't harm anybody else, at least in just the doing of it? Why would you go and then just force somebody else to follow along with that? If you're following the golden rule, if you're following the do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, that also then extends to what you do with the government, and how basically in our life in the past couple hundred years, the civilians in the U.S. and the people, their power mostly just comes from being able to vote. Their power comes from being able to put in power whoever they choose. And that is kind of the only real political violence you can commit against somebody. And there's discussions as to if libertarians should vote or not, and if that is an aggression in and of itself. And then people will come back and say, well, I'm already being aggressed upon by other people trying to vote in more social programs, so yes, you should vote, and you should try to stop those things. And this has been part of me kind of going away from calling myself any kind of an ideologue, where it doesn't matter in modern life. It doesn't, like, just deciding not to, it hasn't benefited my life besides the fact of just I don't worry about it, but it hasn't enriched my life to not vote. It hasn't been negative. It doesn't matter. And I think more, if it's kind of depressing, but if more people thought that way, I think we would be something the step of the right direction of just realizing that the average person doesn't really have a say in most of this shit. But as I was saying, as far as like a moral, if you're going to take a moral stance on something, and most people, and especially in the West, we hold personal and individual liberty as a very high thing. And to whatever extent you actually practice that, or how your political ideologies match up with that, generally most people, whenever they talk about it in their speech, are going to be supportive of personal liberty. You can see this in how Democrats will constantly bring up they're pro-choice, they're pro LGBT issues, they're pro all kinds of other things, but it's always about being for liberty, because especially in America we have this idea of individual liberty being the highest good. Conservatives will then talk about like gun ownership and the right of business owners and stuff like that. But both sides are trying to take the high road of individual liberty to sell to people. So I do see libertarianism as kind of the fulfillment of that. If you are strictly and you follow that completely well as an anarcho-capitalist libertarian, you're not going to be forcing other people to do things. You're not going to force people into your collective. You're not going to try to do that. You're basically there. And it's all, I think a lot of this is because everything's just a meme now. But there was always a meme, and the great libertarian plot to take over the world and then leave everybody the fuck alone. And again, if you're taking this ideology to this furthest extent, I see this one as being the most, or holding up the best, as far as morally, structurally, maybe even practically, and I'll get into that later. But as far as being a moral system, I see this as pretty simple. Treat other people how you want to be treated, personal property rights, and kind of just self-ownership, taking responsibility, not just for how you live your life, but then also for how you treat other people. So then you don't just go and go, well, I'm just voting because other people are making me, and it doesn't matter who I may be hurt by doing that. But self-ownership and all these things, they seem to me at least to be the best of what ideologies can kind of offer, because it promotes at least it should promote a person that is conscious of what's going on around them, is conscious of how they're impacting other people. And as far as like all that goes, like I said, it's the soundest one I can see. It's the soundest ideology I can think of that I've heard of before, and that has any kind of a writing behind it besides just, well, anything pretty much. Also, libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism, market anarchists, it promotes like I said, individual liberty. And like I said, in the West, we hold that very highly. And individual liberty and actually applying that shouldn't just be about bringing up certain classes of society or certain people or whatever it is. If you're looking at the most vulnerable person in a society, the most vulnerable group is an individual, because they have the entirety of the rest of society against them. If you protect the individual, you don't get problems like institutionalized racism or institutionalized sexism or any of these things. If you do truly go for individual liberty, self-ownership, people are allowed to do with themselves and with their bodies what they want to do. Now, you can get personal racism, personal sexism, but as long as the person is not acting on those, as long as the person is not going against that person and using the power of the government, there is much smaller danger to that other person than if the person who doesn't like them is able to go, hey, I don't think that these people should be allowed to trade. I don't think that these people should be allowed to trade with anybody, not just me. I think that there should be a law against them. I think there should be something banning them from entering whatever scene that they want to. So I think as far as promoting liberty and promoting equality, this kind of thing has one of the best answers, because you can talk all you want about wanting to be equal inside of a republic or a democracy, but in the end, it's just going to be the majority of people who rule over the minority. And whatever kind of groups make that up, whatever kind of racial groups make that up, whatever kind of religious groups make that up, the majority in these kinds of systems is always going to rule over the minority. Yeah, I mean, that as far as good, that's all I can really say. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. Like, I don't want to make it so I've only spent a little bit of time talking about this, so I don't think it's good. I think those three things are probably the best you can hope for in this life, as far as leaving people alone and yourself then being allowed to live how you want. That's kind of what we've all that it does seem, at least in the West, how everybody at least talks. Everybody talks, whether you're conservative or liberal or whatever it is, everybody talks like, hey, I just want to be able to do my thing. I just want to leave other people alone. Now, in practice and in how they structure their language sometimes, that's not at all true. And it a lot of times gets mixed around, and they use little underhanded tactics to go, well, I want people to be able to be free, but, within the means of reason and law and good conduct. And it's that doesn't, there's no set definition for those things. So it's very easy to attack certain people. But in something like a truly anarcho-capitalist society, or however that's organized together, if we're living in a perfect world, this is the perfect ideology for it, at least in my mind, and the way that it protects the individual, the way that it protects the smallest minority in the society. Now I'm going to run an ad here, and then whenever we come back, I'm going to go on why, especially today, I don't really see too much use for organized kind of talking amongst people and kind of whatever. Yeah, we'll run an ad. You guys will hear Daniel's voice, and you'll be super happy. Whatever.
Hey guys, today's show is brought to you by Chronologic.network. Chronologic is an Ethereum-based project that aims to solve time-related problems on the blockchain. Through Chronologic's 3 core products, the Ethereum alarm clock, debt smart contracts, and the day token minting mechanism, they solve the problems of payment scheduling, crypto loan time constraints, and unstable token launches. Find out more at Chronologic.network.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the little pipsqueak talking in between about Chronologic. Again, if you guys want to help out the show, if you want to show Chronologic that they should keep on sponsoring us, let them know you heard about them through us. Let them know that you heard about it through me or Zach or Daniel, but specifically me. Let them know that you got info about them. Maybe we piqued your interest a little bit. That definitely helps us out. Maybe you won't want to do that after the end of this show, because I can imagine people didn't particularly like the traditionalism show. I can definitely see people not liking this because I'm kind of going against the grain of what mostly we talk about on the show. But one of my biggest problems starting off with libertarians and modern anarcho-capitalism, all this stuff, is, and again, I think the problem with all this shit is we're all just on Twitter. We're all just saying things, and everything is kind of just flippant. Nobody actually has to do anything with their lives to say that they are an anarchist, or whether that's capitalist or socialist. They could both just be working at Starbucks, paying taxes, and just kind of acquiescing to whatever police presence there is or whatever government presence there is. But one of my biggest problems is we make jokes. There's memes. There's kind of that old joke of, well, you're a socialist, but you have an iPhone and you came here out using Facebook, and then you bought these nice shoes. And well, it's like, I mean, most people I see online, most Twitter followers, most people I know in life who call themselves libertarians or anarchists have a regular job. They work at a corporate structure and they pay their taxes. They don't really structure their life in a way to get away from doing those things because it's simpler. And that's the same thing with socialists. The reason why they're not abstaining from buying iPhones and shoes that are nicer and using Facebook is not because they have a particular weakness about them. It's just because people just kind of go with the flow. If you're in a society, if you're in, especially our society, where comfort has been, the level of comfort has been reached in our lives that is kind of incomprehensible 100 years ago, especially for the average person, but even 100 years ago for like the top people. The level of comfort and access and entertainment we have just open to us has gotten to the point where it's like, why would I go out and risk dying? Why would I go out and risk being thrown in jail if I could just be quiet and enjoy Facebook and movies and food, more food than I could ever want? But I just don't see the actual hard living of anarcho-capitalism or libertarianism in today's world. I don't see it as feasible. I don't really see it as useful to the average person. But that also means to me, if you want to maybe go to your grave as maybe like, I guess, fulfilled that you lived a righteous anarchist life and you didn't give in to certain things, then maybe that's something. But as far as just succeeding in life, I don't see just tweeting online about how taxation is theft is really going to be that useful for you. And that again is the other problem. I keep on bringing this up. Everything's a meme, everything's a hashtag, and it's not doing anything. Even if you do change somebody's mind on Twitter, what are they going to do? Pay taxes just like you? You're not going to change somebody and get them to actually make a difference in the world. We're just going to keep on paying taxes, and if anything actually does come of any of these ideologies, it's going to have to happen after the U.S. collapses. It's just, we're not going to overthrow the government. We're not going to rise up, and whether it's by force or by just like how the Soviet Union just fell apart from in an economic collapse, the individual person is not going to go out and make a difference, because it is so much more comfortable to just sit in your house and just enjoy shit. It's not worth, like, our lives are not as bad as people over in Ukraine or Libya who are overthrowing their government. We have football, we have porn, we have Facebook, we have video games to just kind of distract us from all that. We have craft beer, we have thousands of TV shows that now go on for, we don't even watch movies anymore. Everyone just fucking watches Netflix shows that just go on for 17 seasons. So there's never an end. We can always get you with another cliffhanger. I just don't see any kind of a real benefit coming from those things. And now if you're a person who goes out and maybe you say, okay, I want to go feed homeless people, or I want to go donate to this charity, and I want to actually work, and I don't want to just, because not to say that I don't look at those people in a higher light. I do kind of admire those people that go, hey, I'm not just going to pay taxes that are supposed to maybe go towards poor people. I'm going to go out and do it myself. I'm going to do it directly. I'm going to give these people money for food. I'm going to give these people food or anything like that. Because I do hold those people, whether that's right or not, I hold those people in something of a higher regard than the average person, than myself. But for the most part, I don't see that with people. I don't see people actually making that kind of a difference just by tweeting and just by running a podcast. Like, I'm completely admitting right now how useless I am, because this isn't changing people's lives. This isn't changing minds. Nothing is happening. Nothing is changing in the world. The government's going to tax just as much as it did last year. It's going to have a military budget just as much as last year. It's going to steal and rape and pillage just as much as it did last year, and it's only going to keep getting bigger till it falls apart. So I think that's the biggest problem. It's kind of just impossible to implement in this kind of situation. If we have a completely free society is going to fall into chaos before that, because everybody, it's not like stuff doesn't just happen in the world and in governments because the government just crushes people down under its boot and everybody's against it and everyone's like, oh no, the government's so oppressive, why do they do this? It's never like the empire and the rebellion. It's most people in the empire like it. Most people in the empire enjoy the extra stuff they get. We like the fact that we don't have to pay $3,000 for an iPhone. We like the fact that we can get stuff at Walmart cheap because it's all made with slave labor. It's all made with child labor sometimes. We enjoy all of the benefits we get from being an empire. And even if you don't do that, the amount of people who are on the government dole will just riot if that does not continue. So I don't see this being like a peaceful transition into a anarcho-capitalist or a completely free society. Also, and this is a little bit more of a argument over what is the most important, what is the highest goal in life, but is individual liberty the most important thing? Is individual liberty and is the ability of a person to choose their destiny for themselves, is that really the highest good? And my answer is still probably yes. I don't know what else would be, but that's having that answer for that reason isn't necessarily good. It's like, well, yeah, maybe. This is what's kind of taken me away from being where I would just like, I've never really listed that in a Twitter bio, but from being the kind of person that might do that is going, hey, sometimes people don't make the best decisions and people don't make the right decisions whenever they're given complete freedom. And I know there are plenty of people in libertarian sides and anarcho-capitalist sides that don't argue that society would work that much better with government. And I've done that before where I'd be fine giving up plenty of advancements in medicine and technology and science if we didn't have a giant government, we didn't have the nuclear warheads, we didn't have all these other kind of like other sides of development which are just for death, and kind of like a quasi enslavement. So like I said, I have made that argument. I have made the argument, and not necessarily all libertarians would say that there would be an easy transition over, but I haven't considered for as long what would be, or what I really believe to be the highest good in the world. If anything, I'm more just kind of agnostic again, where I don't know that necessarily individual liberty and self-determination is the greatest good of mankind. The problem with it is I don't see any evidence for that. I don't see evidence telling me that every single person, their best life will be lived if they're able to choose how they live. That's one of the biggest things with states' rights, and then all the way down to individual rights. You tell them, if you're in like an argument, well, who would be the best one to decide how to change my life, or how to benefit my life with money or whatever? Like, is a state better to, like, the closer the government is to you, then hypothetically the better it is going to be able to look at your problems and maybe find a way to solve them. I don't know if that's true. I've heard that argument a lot and it makes sense, but I don't know if that's actually true. I don't know if we are as people, or maybe it's just me, but I would say for most people, if we are really the best people to be figuring out our own problems. I just don't see the evidence for that really anymore. I'm not for taking that away from people, but I don't look at it as this definite and just kind of like hard line of individual liberty is the greatest good in the world, and we should do everything we can for that. I don't, because I haven't really been presented with the evidence. I've seen plenty of people make decisions that they see as being the best for themselves, and they're pretty bad decisions, and it doesn't really work out. And that's, I'm sure, with plenty of people. But I don't know. I'd be interested to see what people say on Twitter after this. If you guys do listen, let me know what you think. But I guess the last thing I would say, and this is purely on the idea of progressing a society, or like I said before, if we could take away, or if we had to give up all the medical advances and all the technological advances and nice phones and everything to get rid of nuclear stuff, I'd be for that. I don't really care. I wouldn't like it in the moment, but I could at least argue myself in the thing of going, well, I mean, if we had to go back to 1920s type stuff, but we didn't have the taxation that we do today, we didn't have nuclear warheads, I could at least live with myself. I don't think that most people would trade that. And I think that something like this, a society where you're very much focused on individual liberty and egalitarianism and equality of equality of not equality of outcome, but equality of potential, or equality of whatever it is. I think you get what I mean. Equality of, like, everyone is equal at the start. One, that's not really how life works. But two, I don't really know that leads itself to progress. I don't know that a completely free society leads itself to progress. I see it more just as like treading water, which could be fine. I don't see necessarily a problem with that. I don't see a problem with a society that just focuses on farming and hunting and kind of gathering for itself. But you don't get this giant explosion in population, these giant advancements in medicine and technology. You don't get those things by just focusing on individual liberty. You get those things by forcing people in a certain way from people who are normally smarter, but not always. You get that by by having money taken from other people where they think it should go into their new dumb business and then put into research or stuff like that. So, again, that's a practical argument. I don't know that I necessarily agree with it on any kind of a moral stance. I still think that stealing from people is wrong. I still think that anything like that is wrong. But as far as making advancements in society, complete freedom and individual liberty, it doesn't really lend itself to that either. But yeah, that's pretty much the episode. If you guys have any thoughts, questions, comments, tell me to go fuck myself. You can get me on Baker's Dozen 93 on Twitter. Tell me why I'm a shill now. Tell me why I'm not a real libertarian anymore. And then we can have a discussion there, and you guys can give me ideas for future episodes. But anyway, thank you for listening. Look forward to Zach's The Coin Pod episode tomorrow. And then we'll be doing our normal Union BTC episode this Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you and have a good night.